Rogue One is directed by Gareth Edwards and stars Felicity Jones, Diego Luna, Ben Mendelssohn, Donnie Yen, Forrest Whitaker, and Mads Mikkelson. Now, I have a lot to say about this, but I'm not going to give any spoilers during this review, okay? First thing I want to talk about actually is my fanboy status as a Star Wars fan, because I really have grown up with Star Wars. I was 7 years old when Star Wars, the original, first came out. And I remember standing in line to see that movie. I remember the very first commercials being seen on TV of heroes and villains and this masked Darth Vader, you know, black. My God, he looks so scary. And all of this, like, you know, crazy science fiction and spaceships and things that I, you know, certainly I hadn't seen in the 7 years I'd been on this earth. But when we went and saw it, of course, you know, I was amazed and delighted. Didn't really totally track with the story. But then it came out on cable. When the very first cable TV came out, I think it was called a On TV. It was this box on your TV that you could click and turn it on. Star Wars, you know, was premiered there for the first time on TV, right? And begged my father to see it. And of course, I was about 9 or 10 at that point. And The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, all of these I saw in the theater with the crowd, you know, opening night or close to it, and was just, I just trading cards, binders, the action figures, all the things that are classically thought of as growing up with Star Wars, I did. I dressed up as Han Solo for Halloween, you know, and it was just part of my life. And so when you have that kind of integration of an entire universe, and it's now, here I am, 47 years old, and here is the next Star Wars movie, 40 years later, right? You know, this has just been something that has always been with me. And so it is, you know, with trepidation, suspense, you know, intense emotion goes into going to see a new Star Wars movie because it has so much to do with how it has shaped so much of my own life and my own views about things in so many different ways. And that might sound really, you know, crazy. These are just, you know, science fiction fantasy movies. Like, what's the big deal? But, you know, when you grow up with this, and it is such a big part of your life, it's a big deal. Have to say that without question, over the last year, this has been the most anticipated movie I have had on my docket. And I'm happy to say that it didn't totally disappoint. But I do have some points to make about the movie itself. So let's go ahead and talk about that. And again, without getting into spoilers. First off, the movie integrates well into the Star Wars universe. There are callbacks to earlier, you know, the earlier original movies, you know, with certain cameos and character inclusions and references to things. And that was all very appreciated. This movie takes place directly before the events of the very first Star Wars movie, Episode 4. And I mean literally right before. So, but it is its own independent story, and it is the story of how the Rebel Alliance captured the plans to the Death Star, which are mentioned at the very beginning of the first Star Wars movie. Princess Leia has the plans, you know, she sticks them into R2-D2, and, you know, shenanigans ensue. So this is everything that enabled her to be able to do that. There are three main characters. There's Felicity Jones, a character which is Jen Ersa. Then there is Cassian Andor, who is a member of the Rebel Alliance who aids her and works with her. And then the main bad guy is Orson Krennic, who is a designer or the director of the Death Star project. So he's your main baddie. But of course, Darth Vader makes an appearance, and so do certain other characters from the first movie. The story itself works Although I do need to say that it is cluttered and a little hard to understand and track with at the beginning. There's a lot going on. It throws you right into the middle. There is very, very little character development going on. You get the backstory on Jin Ursa and her, her and her father and her family and how she fits into things. She is definitely the main character. But all the other characters that are introduced in this movie, you get practically nothing in terms of backstory. It's, like I said, it just throws you right into it. And while I appreciated that they didn't get into a lot of distraction with exposition and having to explain every character's motivation and whatnot, it did leave some questions. When there's none of that there, you kind of go, well, who are these people? And that was a little lacking. Now, there's so much crammed into this movie, especially in the first act, with all the setup that's going on for the story and all the different locations. This thing takes you from planet to planet to place very, very rapidly. And that, the movie gets right into it. And again, I didn't mind that. I liked, the A to B-ness, the snap and pop of the movie. But I found myself asking, many times during the course of the movie, well, who is that person? Well, what's their what's this sort of thing? So, of course, the movie, because it integrates into the Star Wars universe, there are some characters who are presented that you already know. But if you hadn't seen any of the other movies, this is not a standalone movie for that reason. You have to go in knowing certain things because otherwise you're going to be swimming even more. But as far as the, fast-paced is good, but I would have appreciated a little bit, maybe a little bit of exposition, maybe a little bit of character development. That would have been nice. Of course, once the movie gets going, you are totally caught up in what's happening, and once you're up to speed on certain things, things start to make sense. And one thing I did appreciate is that there were certain parts during the course of the movie that I thought, I gotcha, you guys, what about this? What about this during the course of the thing, right? Because you know where this movie is going from the rest of the Star Wars movies, but they didn't get me. Actually, every single little thing that cropped up during the course of the movie that I thought, that's kind of what, was resolved by the end of the movie, and I appreciated that. I thought that was really good. Now, we already know from previews and commercials and whatnot, it's no spoiler at all to tell you that Darth Vader makes an appearance in this movie. I thought that the use of Darth Vader was interesting, but this was the one thing that when it came to the writing and the layout of the story, I did disagree with, more so than I think any other point. I thought that he was not well integrated in the spirit of how Vader was presented in the very first Star Wars. You have the prequels where you have the story of Darth Vader leading up to him becoming Darth Vader and his relationship with the Emperor. But then you move that, so that happened 20 years, something like that, prior to the events of Episode 4, Star Wars. So lots of things have happened, and when Star Wars opens, you have the Death Star, and you have this guy, Darth Vader, and you have Grand Moff Tarkin, who is running the Death Star. And Vader is clearly, under Grand Moff Tarkin, is taking orders from this individual. So Vader is not so much a leader himself. He has not taken over the Imperial fight and is no longer directly under the Emperor. That's not how that's how it's presented in the first Star Wars movie. So that's not quite how it's presented here, and that sort of threw me off a little bit because I expected to see a bit more integration with that original Star Wars movie. So this Vader is presented more as though it's Vader, right after, right under the Emperor sort of thing. So anyway, maybe that could be considered a nitpick, maybe that could be considered a small thing, but to me it was, fairly significant because I think Vader could have been more utilized in this movie. Now, as far as this story being one of how the rebellion conducted itself, how it moves itself forward, how Jyn Erso integrates into it, because she doesn't start out in the movie as part of the rebellion, but she ends up in it. And how that whole thing plays out. I thought that was really good. I thought it brought some new light and some new interesting views on the rebellion, and also on the spirit and character of the people who had dedicated themselves to such a cause, and it being a life or death matter, right? Like really being willing to take it all the way. And this movie is definitely harkens back to some old westerns, actually, in that regard, right? Some of the old Sam Peckinpah films of old, right? You're definitely gonna, if you saw any of those, you're gonna go, oh yeah, when you see this, right? Because these people are willing to go all the way. Now, one thing I will say, though, is that because of the lack of character development and the lack of background on these people, you're not quite tracking with why they're so dedicated, why this is such a big deal, why these people are fighting so hard for this. I mean, yeah, you have you sort of assumed or taken for granted that the big bad empire is bad and the rebels are good, but I really thought that there could have been some more development in this movie, given the, what it is and the story that it's telling. I thought there could have been a lot more done with why this rebellion was so important, why these people were fighting back the way that they were, and what it was all about. So that was a lacking part for me. That was a part that I thought really could have been, boosted a lot more. Now, that all being said, given that they are, take it for granted that they are all as dedicated as they are, this thing is amazing when it comes to showing you the results of that dedication, the battles, okay? The special effects in this movie are amazing. Some of the best I've ever seen. And there is a lot happening at the end of this movie. I mean, a lot. And there's a space battle, there's a land battle, there's the individual battle. There's like a lot going on. And I really, really thought that the direction and the pacing and the editing of this was far superior to Lucas's versions of this, when he would switch back and forth between these kind of things, because in the very first prequel, there are, 3 different things going on at once, very, very similar to this. In Return of the Jedi, right? At the end of Return of the Jedi, there are 3, different battles going on, and they're switching back and forth between those. And that editing and that direction looks clumsy compared to how good Gareth Edwards pulls off the integration of those things in this movie. So I did want to comment on that very, very positively. Things are they just go one to the next to the next. And the end is beautiful. It's a beautiful ending. And you're not going to be disappointed by what happens at the end of this movie. So all in all, despite my criticisms and the movie's shortcomings, I am giving this movie a rating of sheer awesomeness, because I really had a good time, and I think you will too. The movie, is satisfying, it's emotional, it is exciting, it's interesting, and it definitely keeps your attention glued to the screen from beginning to end. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I would very much like to hear your feedback about this, because I'm sure, regardless of what I'm saying, you're going to go see this thing. But I would very much like to hear what you thought. So thank you very much for watching.